Hello my friends, this week it will be 3 years since the Sony A7 III was announced. It was basically the first complete hybrid camera at a very competitive price. Now it is obvious that it has been a huge success. In this video I will talk a little bit about the history of A7 III and I will try to evaluate how competitive it is by 2021 standards. The A7 III will also move to the mid-range once the A7 IV will finally be announced, so it will kind of be like a new release in mid-range category. Back in early 2018, Sony A7 III offered a combination of 7 features that in my opinion made it the first complete hybrid camera. Those were a great full-frame sensor, excellent autofocus, in-body image stabilization, compact size, full sensor downsampled 4K video, great battery life, and dual SD card slots. Furthermore, Sony did so at a $2,000 price point, which was a lot less than expected. Before the release of A7 III, the most popular mainstream hybrid cameras were the Sony A6500 and Panasonic GH5. Sony A6500 is still a very capable camera and it provides very solid output. It already had great autofocus, full sensor downsampled 4K, and it was very small. On the other hand, it is not full frame and it has a lot of drawbacks such as poor battery life, rolling shutter, occasional overheating, and so on. Panasonic GH5 brought some great video specs such as unlimited 4K 60p and 10-bit video later on. It has very good handling and quite a complete feature set. On the other hand, it is a micro four thirds camera, so the low light isn't great, and it is pretty difficult to get a large sensor look with the GH5. The autofocus with early firmwares was also really bad. Full frame sensor is definitely a desirable feature, and IMX410 in A7 III is still a great sensor. It is a 24 megapixel sensor, which is in my opinion a very good compromise between the resolution and processing requirements. Thanks to the BSI technology, it has been a big step up in terms of the low light performance and the dynamic range. Even 3 years after the release, it hasn't really been beaten in those two areas. Even the A7S III doesn't look that much different in a low light due to the downsampling advantage of A7 III. The dynamic range is fantastic. It provides a ton of flexibility in editing. During my 3 years of use, I haven't encountered a situation where I wasn't able to extract enough data from the sensor. This sensor is still being used in newly released cameras such as Nikon Z6 II or Panasonic S5. There is definitely nothing wrong with that because it is a great sensor. The only practical limitation is that it can only do full sensor readout at 40 frames per second, so downsampled 4K 60p is not possible with this sensor. It can only be cropped or binned. Overall, the sensor was and still is one of the biggest strengths of the A7 III. The colors on A7 III have always been a bit of a controversial topic. In fact, it is one of the most color-accurate cameras on the market, according to the chart testing. Ironically, the reviewers have praised quote-unquote fixed colors in Sony A7C. I have compared those in many situations and they were always indistinguishable. Some people may prefer less accurate, vibrant and warm colors from Canon cameras or HDR-ish look of Nikon, but as far as the measurable tests go, Sony A7 III colors are great. Another big strength of the A7 III is the autofocus. It has 693 phase detection and 425 contrast detection points. In the terms of the hardware, speed and accuracy, it is still one of the best focusing cameras on the market. The performance in both stills and video is flawless, so I won't talk much about that. The only area where it lacks a bit are the smart features. It has eye autofocus in stills, which is actually as good as with the latest Sony cameras. Unfortunately, the real-time eye autofocus in video was not available back then. This is a super impressive technology which works great on the newest Sony cameras. It still has face detection in video, which is more than sufficient for most occasions. My only complaint is that the lock-on tracking is not very convenient to use and a bit cumbersome, but you can live without it and use other modes. It has been replaced by proper touch tracking on the latest Sony cameras. Overall, the autofocus on A7 III is still excellent even by 2021 standards. As I mentioned, Sony A7 III shoots full sensor downsampled 6K to 4K video in 24 and 25p. That was a very big deal back in 2018. The video quality is still outstanding. The amount of detail is excellent, but at the same time, it doesn't look overly digital thanks to the low pass filter. A7 III shoots 8-bit video only. 10-bit video is a great feature for advanced filmmakers, but I will say that it is a nice to have feature, not a must have feature. A7 III has great picture profiles, some of which exceed DCI-P3 color space and provide ample room for grading. As you might know, PP8 with Scenic 4 Gamma is still my most favorite color profile. That works great with 8-bit codec. I actually use picture profile off a lot nowadays. It provides very nice natural colors, so it is a great option if you want to use the footage straight out of the camera. If you need higher video specs, including ProRes RAW and 4K 120p, Sony offers the A7S III, which is a fantastic video camera. I have recently made a review of that one, and it will be linked in the description. One of the things that I still greatly appreciate after the 3 years of owning this camera is the size. A7 cameras are slowly getting bigger, so we might not get such a small package in the next generation. It weighs just 650 grams, which is remarkably low for a full-frame camera with in-body image stabilization. A7S III is still a small camera, but it is significantly thicker. It also has a larger grip. Some of the people will probably appreciate that. I think that the A7 III grip matches the body size and the handling is very good overall. Even with telephoto lenses, I have never experienced any discomfort, although that is individual. The build quality of the A7 III is generally very good. It uses a magnesium frame, the display attachment is very solid, and it feels very good overall. Two weak places of the build quality are the thin surface coating and hanging cover ports, which may get in the way when you have something connected. There is a weak point in the weather sealing on the bottom of the camera. I have used the A7 III in reasonably intense rain and temperatures way below 0 degrees, but I have never encountered any issues. Regarding the controls, I think that the button placement is logical and the buttons are not cramped in one place. There are 3 command dials and exposure compensation dial, so I have no complaints there. The only thing that I miss is the drive mode dial, but I have mapped that on a custom button, so it is not that big of a deal. The user interface is generally a weakness of A7 III. The function menu is actually pretty good. It is fully customizable and it can be used for the most frequently changed settings. The main menu is not very well structured and it has its own logic. Having said that, I don't think that it is something that would cause issues on a daily basis. If you invest some time into customizing my menu and function menu, changing settings on A7 III can be a painless experience. Fortunately, Sony has already fixed the menu in A7S III. The new menu is very well structured and easy to navigate. It can also be fully controlled using the touchscreen, which is a big improvement as well. The in-body image stabilization in A7 III is a compromise between the stability and the body size. I think that it is a good compromise. It is not as good as with Panasonic S1 of course, but at that size it can't be much better, as we can see in the case of Panasonic S5. I think that it provides very good body size to sensor size to performance ratio. The IBIS behaves very predictably and there is no warping. It is sufficient for static shots up to about 50mm. If you apply a bit of warp stabilizer, even 85mm is okay. The future of stabilization for Sony is in my opinion the metadata capture, which can be used to stabilize the footage after it was taken. I've talked about that more in my A7C review. Unfortunately, A7 III doesn't have this feature. My two least favorite things about the A7 III are the display and the viewfinder. The viewfinder has 2.36 million dots and 0.78 times magnification. It is okay to use and it does the job, but it is not particularly impressive. The same basically applies to the display. It uses a 3-inch panel with 921,000 dots. Having said that, it actually works well for focus pulling, as you can see in any of my lens reviews with A7 III. Back in 2018, Sony probably had to spare the cost somewhere to meet the $2,000 price point, and the display and EVF are in my opinion still reasonable components to do so. On the other hand, the overall Sony E-mount ecosystem may be the biggest advantage of the A7 III nowadays. First of all, the lens selection is the best of all mounts. One particular lens that gave the A7 III a huge popularity boost was Tamron 28-75mm f2.8 Di3 RXD. It was released very shortly after the A7 III and it allowed the users to get proper full-frame f2.8 experience under $3,000. It is a very good lens, but I replaced it with Sigma 24-70mm f2.8 DGDN, and I will make a long-term review of this lens very soon. You can get basically anything for the E-mount, including specialties such as 12-24mm f2.8. There is a lot of budget-friendly options from third-party manufacturers, such as this Viltrox 24mm f1.8. My favorite lenses are small wide-angle primes. Sony FE20mm f1.8G and 24mm f1.4GM are the two best that I have ever tested, so I am very happy in this regard. The other important part of the ecosystem are other cameras. There are already a lot of E-mount cameras that you can eventually upgrade to or switch to from A7 III. If you want something very portable for traveling, there is the A7C. If you become an advanced filmmaker, there is the A7S III or FX3. If you need more resolution for commercial use, there is the A7R4. Also worth mentioning is the battery life. The A7S III was the first camera to use NP FZ100 batteries. You can get well over 1000 shots on a single charge or 3 hours of 4K video. Only the A7C and A6600 with the same battery can beat the A7 III in this regard. The A7 III can also shoot 10 frames per second with autofocus continuous and mechanical shutter. That is still a very solid value nowadays. To sum up, the A7 III has changed the market quite a bit since it was announced in February 2018. I think that it was the first complete hybrid mirrorless camera, and it is still a complete camera in 2021. The price of the A7 III has just recently decreased for the first time since the release. That kind of puts it into the mid-range category. I think that it has a lot to offer as a mid-range hybrid camera in 2021. First of all, it just takes very nice stills and video. It has a great sensor, which is still very up to date. The autofocus is also excellent even by 2021 standards. It doesn't have the latest video features such as 4K 60p and 10-bit codec, but it is still a very capable camera for content creation or even most types of commercial use. The E-mount ecosystem is much more complete than it was 3 years ago, and it is one of the main selling points of A7 III. The only 3 things that I can complain about are the display, EVF, and the menu. These are basically the only 3 items that show the age of A7 III. Other than that, I think that it is an excellent mid-range hybrid camera in 2021, and therefore I still highly recommend it. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope that you liked this video and that you have found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.